My name is Adam Paul Martinez. I grew up here in California, Los Angeles specifically, the suburbs. I am an architectural designer. I'm studying to be an architect. It takes quite a bit to get your license. So I'm taking the test to get my license. So I can't call myself an architect yet, but it's on the way. Um, this is a little bit of what I do. I think some of you may have seen this. This is the Walt Disney Concert Hall. A lot of my friends have worked on this. Maybe you've seen this around town too. This is in downtown LA. This is by Kupimablau. This is a performing arts school. This is also done by my faculty and friends of mine. And that was pretty quick. That's a little bit of there's just two examples of LA architecture that my friends have done specifically with the school I come from. My background, I went to SciArc. It's a very avant-garde architecture school. Most people have never heard of it unless you are in the field of architecture. At SciArc, you do a little bit of everything. You do film, you do models, you do furniture, you do jewelry. You pretty much do everything that revolves around design, not necessarily specifically architecture, but architecture school. It's a very weird school. Most architecture people look at SciArc as like a bunch of crazy people, but that's what I come from. My little bit of architecture that I started with, I grew up as a kid in Santa Fe Springs, and there was a building around the corner from us, and that building was the Clark Estate, and it's a really old 100-year-old house, and I knew I just felt different in that building than I did in my own home, which I think everyone here probably lives in maybe just a typical 1950s tract home. Well, this residential house was made in 1918. It's really boxy, and it just felt better. It felt like a better quality of life. And that was my introduction to architecture. And that interest has grown from there. I went to East Los Angeles College, which I'm now a faculty member at. I teach architecture programs, and from East Los Angeles College, I transferred into SciArc and graduated, and hence I work for an architecture firm now. So a little bit about my schoolwork before I get into my professional work. I'm going to be flipping through this because it's really not relevant to what you'll be doing in the field, but in my schoolwork, which kind of overlaps a little bit with a lot of the schools you would be getting into if you do architecture. It has to do with a lot of form finding, a lot of buildings that don't look like the typical buildings you've seen before. Lots of weird shapes, lots of new programs that you're not used to. A lot of algorithms. If you are a good scripter who knows how to deal with code or knows how to code in general, you can be pretty good at this. I don't, so I get around it in another way. But a little bit of this is a little bit of this form finding. A lot of it is just self-reflection in terms of reading different architectural works, architecture plans, and trying to mimic it in your own way. But you're finding things, and this, I think, at school, that's where you're supposed to be. That's supposed to be what you'll be doing. That's what you're supposed to be doing, rather. You're supposed to be trying new things out because there's no budgets to constrain you. You're supposed to push the envelope of what a building can actually be. And sometimes in the professional realm, you do have the victories of actually pulling them off, such as the Walt Disney Concert Hall that you saw in the first slide. These really just strange looking buildings that actually are centerpieces, and I think they're kind of the gems of the city. So these are things that I did in school. So moving on to professional work, when I was in school, I interned quite a bit. I interned at about four firms, and I ended up landing this firm, which is NAC Architecture, which I'm currently at right now. And I just knew it was different than all the others. They mainly do LAUSD schools, which I understand you guys are Rolling Hills, and it's not an LAUSD school, or even in the district. But LAUSD's Los Angeles Unified School District is kind of like an outlier in the sense that they want the same campus, the same quality of rooms, and it's not, you can't really do much in terms of design. Like, how do you push the envelope? And that's the struggle. And it's really fun because this specific firm that I work for, we do a lot of color. We do a lot of graphical design because we can't really do really high-end quality geometric design. So we look for in other ways. This school that you're looking at right now on this slide is the wonderful Prep Academy up in Delano. This was the funders for this is Palm Wonderful, the drink, and also the pistachios. They do also, they own Fiji water. The couple's name is Resnick. They basically bought a whole bunch of property in California, and they've just been giving back to the farmers. They're just tearing down almond fields, which is the wonderful academy, and building a whole new charter school for free for the farmers' children to better their lives, which is really great. And it's free, so it's really awesome. And here's just a little bit of the diagrams of how we came up with the concept for these schools, and how you start with just a classroom, and then it becomes a bar, and then it breaks and it bends, and then how do you just cover it with the roof, because Delano is immensely hot and lots of sun, so you got to have a lot of shade. And that's how we came up with the idea. So you have these huge shade structures overlapping the campus, so that children or even high schoolers and preschoolers, they can gather under and play. It's ended up coming out pretty well. In South Central, right across the street from USC, the Coliseum, we have a charter school. And this was a very small budget. It was, it sounds relative, but it's $1 million, which is very, very, very low for a full-on high school. So they said, hey, we have a little strip of land. We want to put a whole entire high school here. We have $1 million, make it work. And it ended up being USC Hybrid High. And what I like about this is that even though it is small, we're able to use color, we're able to use light to make things feel bigger than what they actually are. And we're able to use lots of interesting materials in interesting ways, like how can we put the wood on the ceiling, such as these rafters here? How do you use carpet on the walls so that it dulls the sound? Things like that. And it's really fun to be investigating these type of things. Next slide. Oh, and it has like a basketball court over the parking lot because we couldn't fit anything going anywhere. Right now, I'm finishing up Venice High School. You've probably seen Venice High School in the movie Grease, and I think it's an American History X, and there's lots of music videos been shot here. But Venice High School is the gem of LAUSD, and we won that competition. That was from the bonds that were passed about 3 years ago. And what essentially it was California said, we want to spend money on schools. So we voted yes to allocate some money for schools, and LAUSD was allocated some of that pot of the money. They held 3 competitions, and of those 3 competitions, my firm won all 3. We beat out everyone else, and everyone lost a lot of money that didn't win, but we won a lot of money. So, which is good, because it's solid work for the next 7-ish years. So Venice High School was the first competition. And what it was is this building in the back here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's building in the back, the gymnasium here, and this main building off the street. There's a bunch of ancillary little tiny buildings. They don't really count, but those 3 main buildings, because over the course of 100 years or so, Venice High School grew and expanded, and instead of doing major buildings, they started doing bungalows. They eventually became permanent bungalows, which is never a good thing because bungalows are just meant to be temporary. And so when we came on campus, there was bungalows everywhere, and no one could really use the campus anymore because it was just you're running into different buildings. So we consolidated everything to 2 main classroom buildings and then 1 large gymnasium, because there was LAUSD has this habit of building 2 gymnasiums back in the 50s, there was a girls' gymnasium and a boys' gymnasium. I don't know what that means. So like right now we just use gymnasiums. And so now we have this enormous gymnasium that houses the community. What's great about this project though is how open it is. The community in general in Venice, which is high value property, is typically below middle class. The surrounding community here, it's becoming gentrified in the sense that like the people who are moving in actually are of a higher tax bracket, to say. So, but right now, currently, it's of the lower middle class. So people like to spend their time outdoors, and the children that are here are not well off. So before this campus was closed, anytime that school was out of session, but now we made it in such a way, we're finishing up at the end of the year. We made it in such a way where now it's open, but everything's brand new. Everything is designed really well, if I say so myself, so that the community can take back the campus, and really they can start using the track at night. They can go onto the campus and enjoy the lights, the main quad here. They can hold community like swap meets, because there's like a platform here too. They can do tons of things, and I think that's one of the major selling points that LAUSD liked, is that we're giving the campus back to the community, which I think these are impactful changes that are important for architecture, because architecture in general, people think it's just you know, I have a little bit of money, make me a building, but there's a lot of social there's a lot of social aspects to what you do and the decisions you make. So that's why I think it's really important. Graphics. You can see in this photo here, we have these angular diamond-shaped graphics. Since we can't do really crazy geometry like the Walt Disney Concert Hall for these LAUSD schools, rebranding schools is where we get a lot of bang for your buck. Paint and vinyl is really cheap compared to throwing up a wall. So how do we rebrand a school and have the school children in school, even their colleagues, for the faculty, how do they have a sense of self-pride in that school? How can we rebrand their stationery? How can we rebrand outerwear? How about their football uniforms? Can we rebrand everything so that there's some school pride to it? So when people look at it, they say that is Venice High School. And this is just an attempt of that. These colors came from a conglomeration of the surrounding community. We went out and we took photos of all the sites of Venice. And we took those photos and we condensed them all into like little strips. And so we set all the strips up together, and the main colors we saw were these colors. And we just like poked them and randomly just chose the colors because that was the community. And so that's how we got this idea, this diamond-shaped wave. So you see this diamond-shaped wave throughout the campus in different murals. You see it on the wooden gym floor. I think I have a picture of that. Yeah, here it is. You see it as a mural on the walls, and actually we went a little further. We really did design the stationery and football uniforms. And so if they use them, great. If they don't use them, oh well. But they're there, and I think it's a very. I feel proud of this school because I've been in this school for 4 years designing this stuff, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. This Watson Field, this is part of the design for Venice. The visitor side is obviously on the other side. So the way Venice works is that they do a rally right before the game, and they walk through this promenade to kind of show a little bit of gumption that says, yeah, don't be scared, like, well, be scared of us type of thing. So there's this whole procession that happens here. So we built around that, which is fun. And here's just a rendering of like how the community can use it. The community can start using it as exercise and holding their weekend soccer games or things like that. So yeah. And a little bit about like the technical side of architecture. I'm sure you've seen plans and sections and elevations, and these are just them. This is an elevation of the gymnasium of all four sides, and how we go from the different phases of design to make it real, which is called a construction document set. And that construction document set consists of these highly technical drawings. This Venice High School was so large, the project was so large that we split it up into 9 different projects because of phasing constraints and students being on campus. You have to take that into account. So now with COVID, we're able to zoom up the schedule about 1.5 years in advance. So we are finishing at the end of the year instead of next year, which is great. So it took me a while to look at this stuff and understand what everything means, because you don't do this in school. You don't put together a document set like this. You're just doing pretty pictures and pretty forms and trying to find like a really nice building. But really, when you get into the meat of how things are put together, it gets really fun. I like just throwing on a podcast and just drawing all day. It's really great. It sounds really nerdy, I know, but it's really fun. The next phase after this construction document gets approved, you see the stamp here, the architect stamp, would be construction administration, which is the phase I'm in now. Construction administration is a funny thing. It's you might think it might be unneeded. In my opinion, I think it is needed. Basically, what it is while the contractor is out there building the building, there may be a question that comes up. So the contractor asks the architect, and the architect has to answer it. Plus, there's a thing called submittals, which is, hey, architect, this is the type of wall I'm going to make, and here is the material for it. Do you like this material? And we say yes, or we say no, or we say reject it or something, and or revise it. And that's basically that's kind of in a nutshell what construction administration is. On these big projects, it's needed. Residential projects is probably not needed, but that's the phase I'm in now. It's a question I get asked quite a bit when people ask me what you do for architecture after the drawing set's done, because drawing sets only take maybe 1 year, but the project lasts maybe 7 years. So that's what they ask. So there's a lot more to architecture than just putting together a set of drawings. These are detailed sections. The callouts here you see in these bubbles, they get linked to the finer details, which is you go from a macro level of the big gym to a section to the detail. And I should have details in here. Here's the details. Here's some window details of how things are put together. A lot of coordination with the manufacturers, like how do the things come together? And it's called tectonics. How does the window frame connect to the flashing, connect to the waterproofing, connect to the wall? It's just a whole coordination game. You get to talk to a lot of people. You get to visit a lot of sites and figure out how it works. You get to see mock-ups. People build a small little building of what you have in your drawing set, and then they get to knock it down, which is kind of fun to see. Just take a sledgehammer to things is pretty great. Yeah, I think a lot of this is repetition on the end. I think I'm actually finished. I kind of was thinking to myself, like, how would I convey to a group of students what I do on a normal day-to-day basis and how I got there. So that's why I covered my school and I covered my transition into the professional realm. Since I'm not sure if you're junior high or if you're high school, but I wanted to show you a little bit about my school. So SCIARC is it's pretty high up there in the rankings. It's really difficult to get into, but it's really fun if you get there. It's really intense. You will not sleep for 5 years. So it's pretty crazy. So you're a lot of all-nighters, a lot of late nights working, but you get to do a lot of great stuff. You get to travel quite a bit. We traveled to Rome. We traveled to Detroit. We shot a movie in Detroit. We have really great faculty. The people who did Star Wars came down and they showed us how to do CGI to create like a scene such as Iron Man. A lot of people who come to SciArc, they end up working for like Pixar. If you're into that kind of thing in modeling, you can do that. Architecture is not, especially architecture degree from SciArc, is not necessarily just strictly architecture, it's design in general. So if you have an interest in anything design related, jewelry, furniture, cars, film, a lot of CGI stuff, this is the school for you. Right now, because of COVID, everything's geared towards filmmaking. So a lot of these projects are documented in like a movie format. So it's definitely an avant-garde school. It's not just for someone who just wants to learn how to put a wall together. It's for someone who really wants to find something that they're interested in and really pursue that specific thing. I wanted to leave enough time for questions. I see there's only 1, 2, 3, 4. What is that? And I don't know how many people are in the image. So
there are 4 in here, and there are 6 in the Zoom. So there's about 10 of them here.
Okay. Well, I mean, I wanted to leave enough time for questions, mostly because I usually get a bunch of questions, and yeah. So just, I mean, if any little thing, just ask away. Otherwise, I can just keep talking.
If you stop sharing your screen,
Sure.
you'll see everybody that's on Zoom, although it looks like they all have their cameras off. And then on our camera here, we have some of the students in the class. Anyone in the room have any questions? Blake, you have one?
Yeah. On like a average project, like how much of the project do you get like your creativity in the project?
Miss Gorman, can you repeat the question so I can hear it?
Sure. He said, like on an average project that you work on, how much of your creativity do you feel influences the project?
Oh, that's a good question. If I were anywhere else, I would say very minimal. But in my specific firm, even the little guy has a say. I'm 5 years into the profession, and in my firm, I was made an associate, which is not necessarily the bottom level, but I have a say now. But even when I was right out of school, the design principal, the guy in charge, the main guy, his name is Michael Pinto. He took a suggestion I made, and now it exists in a building. So it in my specific firm, very influential. Everyone has a say. That's not the case for all firms. You just have to find the right firm. But I feel everyone in my firm feels very respected in that regard.
Is your firm smaller? Would you say that? Like, do you think that's what makes it a little bit?
So my firm has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 offices. We operate as one firm, as opposed to, say, there's a very popular firm called Gensler, and they're worldwide. They operate as a singular firm, so they don't work on each other's projects, but we operate as a single firm. And of that, there's like, I think 200, 300 people. I forget. We just bought another firm out in Columbus, so now there's like the 5 offices. We have 1 in China and 2 up north in Washington. So I think it's like 300. I'm not sure, but down here in LA, there's about 50 something people. We hire so many people during the recession, during the COVID, because we had so much work, that we now have more people than desks. So I'm working from home now. So when I go back to the office, or when we all go back to the office, some people don't have a place to sit, which is a good problem to have, I guess, but I don't know.
Yeah. Does anybody else in the room have a question?
Yeah. Do you have to be like really, really good at math to become an architect?
That's like the question I always get. And especially talking to a STEM thing, I was kind of thinking if I should even bring that up. No, I don't deal with math. Math and I are not good friends. we are mortal enemies. Even though I like math, math hates me. No, I find math very interesting. It's very difficult for me to wrap my head around it. You know, I don't know how well you guys are in math, but I don't know do you know what a sine wave is?
Heard of it.
Yeah, it's like when you get to geometry, you'll start learning like how to calculate waves. I didn't know what it was because like, you're just drawing little waves on paper. But when I started punching those things into my programs and actually visualize what a sine wave actually does, I was like, oh, that makes sense to me now. I understand math a little bit better. But no, you don't have to be good at math. A lot of that math part gets thrown over to the structural engineers. They kind of calculate how the building needs to be held up. There's rules of thumb that I follow. We're not completely ignorant of of gravity, but yeah, you don't have to be good at math. I'm not really that great at math. I can get by, but no. That's a very good question.
That's okay. Does anyone on Zoom have a question? They could either unmute or use the chat.
What is your favorite thing to plan out? Like, do you like modern things to plan out, or you like old kind of things? If that makes sense.
Like the
architecture itself, like New England, kind of like those schools and things like that, where like you were showing us earlier, that more modern type of.
Oh, okay. That's a good question. I don't know. There's those people that I showed you who did those specific works of architecture, they're all over like 70 years old. Like they're really old. All of them are dudes, really old dudes. There's one woman who just recently passed away. Her name is Zaha Hadid that I really like. She has really crazy wavy buildings, very math driven. So if you want to do the crazy stuff, you got to know math, but I'm not really into it. But I like visualizing it and like taking it in and experiencing it. But I like modernism. Modernism is a lot of straight lines, a lot of those square boxes type stuff, a lot of white. But I really do appreciate this firm in LA called Morphosis. The guy who runs it, his name is Tom Main. He's my old teacher. He won a Pritzker Prize, which is like the Nobel Prize for architecture. It's really difficult to get. There's two people who won the Pritzker Prize here in LA. The first one, the image you saw, the Walt Disney Concert Hall, was one of them. He started my school. And then there's Tom Main, the guy who also started my school, but my old professor. And they do incredible work. A lot of European architecture does a lot of modernism, a lot of industrial looking stuff. But I tend to gravitate towards that instead of, column with flourishes and decorative stuff on it. It's not really my thing.
So
I can appreciate it, but
are you not a fan then of Gaudi?
no, I actually am. He's one of, but he's a modernist. Like I would say he's a modernist. A few years ago, I was able to visit the Sagrada Familia again, and I was able to go in the spires, and I was able to go walk down the steps, and was freaked out because there's no handrails, and these things are disgusting, like disturbingly steep. But Gaudi, he was definitely an influential guy, and the sense on how he made his buildings. I can show you some pictures if you guys ask me. I can find them and I'll send them your way. But how he made columns was really crazy. How he made columns, and
aren't all of the columns in? So Blake, I don't know if you remember from Spanish last year, we did talk a little bit about Gaudi. If you've ever been to Barcelona or seen pictures of Barcelona, a lot of the architecture there was done by Antoni Gaudi. And I think that the columns in La Sagrada Familia, aren't they all different?
most of them are, yeah. I think maybe the tops are different. A lot of them are 3D printed, which if you go to SciArc, I end up having my own 3D printer because there's no way of getting around it. You're gonna have to 3D print something. CNCing, 3D printing, laser cutting. Actually, I have a laser cutter too. There's all kinds of fun stuff you do, but yeah, with Gaudi's buildings, they 3D print most of those columns now, and they use a chisel type of 3D printer. But yeah, no, it's really fascinating how they finish it. It's really great. I mean, they're still building it, which is kind of nuts. But
They've
Yeah.
been in construction since like the 1800s.
yeah, and I think this decade is when they should finish. So, which is great.
2025, I think, is the goal.
Yeah, I mean, but if you go now, it looks pretty finished to me. I don't know what they're really going to do, but I think there's a couple more spires that they got to throw up. But I don't know. It looks pretty great to me. So I don't know. Any other questions though? Because this is, I really enjoy the questions. Another question I usually get is, how long did it take for you to get really good at what you're doing? And I'm like, what? Like, I'm learning something new every day. Even the older architects, they always learn something new every day. There's always new processes on how to build something, always new details, always new form and functions that you're learning. And it's a consistent learning experience. You get to learn about everything really, because each building is used differently. A building that is going to be a museum for, say, anthropology is going to be different than an art museum, is going to be different than a school, is going to be different than a residential house for this specific person who is just a factory worker, who's different than a billionaire house. It's everything's different. So you get to learn a little bit about the nuances of architecture, of different people and different it's called programs, how the building's being used, typologies. It's really fun. You're always getting to learn new things. Tons of cool books you get to read and explore. Lots of traveling, which is really great. For me, my wife and I are wanderlusts. We like to travel and see new things, and it's always a learning experience.
I actually have a question that I think would help you guys too. For like planning for college and beyond college, how important would you say it is to have an advanced degree in your field, or even like, that you go to a school specifically for architecture in order to be successful in the field?
That's actually, there's a lot of misconceptions with the degrees, specifically in architecture. I have a professional degree. There are other degrees you can get in architecture, but they really don't count. If you have a Bachelor of Arts in architecture or a Bachelor of Science in architecture, they absolutely mean nothing in the field. Like, it's almost as if you just wasted 4 years of your life. You have to get a Bachelor of Architecture, not a Bachelor of Arts, but a Bachelor of Architecture. It's called a B.Arch degree, and it's considered a professional degree. So it's 5 years, and once you graduate, you have it's called NCARB, is like the governing board for architecture. They basically say, once you have this degree, you have 5 years of experience, and then you only need 2 more years of experience out of the field to become a full architect. So you have to take your tests, but you have to wait the 2 years. If you get a Bachelor's of Arts in architecture or a Bachelor's of Science in architecture, you graduate with 0 years. You can work for a firm, but you have to work for 7 years in order for you to become an architect. Just to get that experience. You're really just wasting your time with those specific degrees. You can, once you get that B.Arch, you don't necessarily need the master's to become an architect. You don't need a doctorate to become an architect. You can go for those things, but they usually specialize when you go for those things.
Okay. So what would you say then is for someone who would get their Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science in architecture, like what can they do with those degrees?
Well, when I teach at ELAC, and a lot of the students there, they get accepted into these kind of schools that don't offer the B.Arch. They go to get the Bachelor's of Science in architecture, and I don't know. I keep telling them, don't waste your time. When you get to the field, it's not going to mean anything. You try getting a job. It's not going to be easy. What you can do, you can work for a firm, but you're going to get paid about $10,000 less starting out, which is highly significant, especially in architecture. So you just spend the extra year, just get the right degree. It's really the schools here is Pomona, SciArc, USC, and then there's Woodbury. Those are the ones that are offering the degree here in LA County.
Gotcha.
Oh, that's really good information.
Yeah.
because I would,
Yeah.
and that's, bachelor's of art or bachelor's of science is what you're typically gonna get if you go to a traditional college.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Adam?
Do you design houses? You are mostly like buildings.
Can you repeat the questions, Ms. Gorman?
Yeah, he asked if you design houses as well, or mostly like buildings, like what you were showing us.
Oh, okay. So for my professional life, above board, at the firms, we design the buildings, which I showed you. Personally, I have a side hustle and I design houses. And I have a friend of mine who actually works for the same firm, grew up together, and we do houses. We're finishing a house in Carson right now. I have another one in Norwalk that's happening, and quite a few others around LA County, but in various levels of finishing, but of like design. But yes, houses and buildings. I do both.
That's awesome.
And is modernism still your like stylistic choice for the houses as well as like more?
When you get into residential design, it really all revolves around the budget. We try to, there's called like features, where we try to put in a little bit of like a design feature into the house. But for the Carson project, we have a client who's straight up said, I don't like modernism. I just want a house that looks like that. So I was like, okay, well, we can't do much. But so you got to give them what you want. There's always like this, you have to work with the client and you push them gently.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have some cool features in it, but it's not straight boxes. But whatever, it'll come one day.
Would you want to design your dream home? Like if you had the chance to design your home, would you do it? And what would it look like?
Sure. I like simplicity. I like open floor plans. Despite what the images you've seen, like my home would be the boringest home you've ever seen. I don't like, I really don't like walls. I just really just want it to be open, and I want the maximum amount of open windows that you can have. So I just don't like stuffiness, and lots of light. My favorite home of all time is this home called I mentioned the Clark Estate, and then there's other one called I don't speak French, but it's called Maison à Bordeaux. It's in France, and it's just simply 3 boxes on top of each other, all open floor plan, and it's gorgeous. It's really gorgeous. Simplicity. It's really, you can't go wrong with that. Small piece of land, put a box on it that's done very well, very clean and not ugly, but done very well, and you can live a better life.
Cool. I think that's we're getting close to the end. 2:40 is when they leave school. So if you guys don't have any more questions or anything, I guess we'll say thank you. Yeah, we'll give a little round of applause. Thank
Oh,
you.
cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah,